If you don't have the amount of money or income or success that you want or need in your life to live abundantly, then you can't afford to miss this conversation. Now, you do know that your relationship with money and success are 95% subconscious, just like every other behavior we have, right? Graeson Howland knows that too, and he helps social workers and therapists heal their relationships with money so that they can create abundant practices and lives. Now, at the time of this recording for Rich Social Worker, Grayson was the founder of Therapist Money Mindset. Now, he's since rebranded as Therapist Revitalized. And in this conversation, you're going to hear him explain the common unconscious beliefs that keep most of us from financial success. You're going to hear about the relationship between attachment and money, and specifically, Grayson shares how he overcame depression and anxiety and was able to break the conflicting patterns of sabotaging beliefs that were keeping him from success. They might sound familiar because they might just be some of the ones that you're coming up against. Now, you're going to want to stick around to the end to get Grayson's special offer to you. And honestly, this is a conversation that I look forward to listening to over and over again. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here we go. Hey, Grayson.
Hey.
I'm excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So you are talking about like healing money trauma and money scripts and things like that. And that's really where my rich social work journey started. And so I thought that that's what I was going to be talking about. But, I'm now in the entrepreneurial space. So
yeah,
take it over. Tell us a little bit about just your journey and how you articulate for us the space that you actually are in, why it's so important for you, and why you think it's important for social workers or people in the helping profession in general.
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Grayson. I'm in Reno, Nevada. I'm going to University of Nevada, Reno. I am actually a social work student. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons we really connect is because I'm not just, a therapist at this point. I'm in social work school and as a social worker, you get like a sort of a different training than just straight counseling. So I help therapists heal fear, guilt, and self-doubt, or therapists heal fear, guilt, and self-doubt about making more money, about launching their entrepreneurial vision. For some people, that means raising their rate. And for other people, that means raising their rate and building an empire, whether that's book deals, that's, keynote speaking, that's building real estate portfolios. So yeah, I find this really important because at the age of 16, I started to go to leadership summits and leadership conferences. And I really found myself, part of myself, at least in that environment by like watching all of these successful people talk about how to be successful. And I was like, this is just a class. Like, this is just a skill you can learn. This isn't some sort of magical juju that happens. Maybe you get an interest in it, but it's something that you build up. And, but at the same time, I struggled with depression and stuff and anxiety when I was a teenager. And I had this part of me that was really interested in business, but I had parts of me that like really feel scared and like guilty about making money. And we can talk more about sort of where that came from, because I think there's societal reasons for that. And I think there's also just personal reasons for that. But it wasn't until a couple years ago that I really started to unpack this fear that I had, because I was just keeping myself small. I was keeping myself broke, and and more important than the money, I was keeping my vision and my gifts to myself. And as I started to go through grad school, I realized like, this isn't going to change. Even if I get a license, I'm still going to be on insurance panels. I'm still going to be undercharging clients. I'm going to be too afraid to have a cancellation policy. So everything about my mindset and my emotions was holding me back. So then I was able to finally make the last push to heal it. And then, so at this point, that's what I do, is I help other people to figure out the emotions. And I call that the step zero, because there's a lot of people in this space talking about strategy and talking about all of the steps and like the mindset to create a successful business as a therapist or a coach or otherwise. But I think a lot of people are stuck at step zero, where they're following and they're looking, but they're like, I can't do that. Like, that's not for me. I would be a bad person if I were to get big and to make the money and to build the businesses. So that's who I really speak to.
I love that you speak to them, because, I
I can say that that was part of my evolution and journey as well, but not on a conscious level, right? And I think that a lot of the people that are attracted to rich social worker are attracted to the concept of the idea. But when I end up having conversations with them, they're exactly where you just articulated. They don't actually believe it for themselves. And again, I get it, because I was there as well. Like, you know, reading Think and Grow Rich and The Science of Getting Rich, and You Were Born Rich, and still, and you know, naming my company Rich Social Worker.
Yeah, which I love, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it was really aspirational, because it was like, you know, I'm hearing people say that this is possible. I'm reading this, I'm shifting my mindset, but I'm still not there.
Right.
And still not believing. I'm not talking about now.
Right.
Saying,
yeah.
Right. When I start, right? Like, just like, well, you know, what's it going to hurt to try, put it out there? And at the same time, I was also learning about, you know, law of attraction, and just like ways that we just attract our experiences and kind of repeat the same history. And I was saying, you know, well, I can't get any lower, so I might as well, you know, try here. So I think, though, that one of the things I love about what you're doing is you know, you are a student.
Yeah.
And you, I have clients who are, you know, 20, 30 years into their profession, who are stuck and are scared. And so can you talk a little bit about, you know, your perspective and like what you see as maybe some of the challenges for people when they do start to unpack, or at least even if maybe what's keeping them from unpacking, right? But what comes up for your typical client?
Yeah. So I think it's worth doing like a little bit of context setting at this point, like who is a therapist and sort of why do they end up in this profession? Why do we end up in this profession? Because I think that can give us some clues as to sort of the emotional foundation that sets us up to have this problem. So a therapist, there's this old quote, is like, a therapist is someone who needs 40 hours of therapy a week. So, and I don't say that like in like a demeaning sense. I mean that like when we become therapists, we do it because we participate in the healing energy and like that attunement and that relationship that creates the healing. And that feels super good. That feels so good. But by this point, by the time we've become a therapist, it's likely that we've built our life around taking care of other people's needs because it feels so good. It feels so good to be in that relationship. So I think that people who end up being therapists in general sort of have a tendency to swing towards the side of taking care of other people's needs over their own. But in a way, that's how they take care of their own needs, is by helping other people. That helps them. So therapists, this sort of personality type that we inhabit, is like sort of self-sacrificing and self-neglecting, not in a negative sense, but just part of our life. So we get all of this emotional richness from our work, but we end up saying money doesn't matter. And then over time, and especially through grad school and through our upbringing, there's like this sort of anti-capitalist sort of thing, which comes to people. And then the way they interpret that is, if I make money, then I'm a bad person. Then I'm like a greedy, bad capitalist. So then by the time you come to me, or you're starting to realize these things and unpack these things, you have sort of like financial self-neglect. You have an ability or a tendency to take care of other people's needs. And what I find that really boils down to every single time is like a fear of rejection, because we're afraid that if we charged the rate that we wanted, or we built the business that we wanted, like some people are going to say no, and they're not going to be able to afford it. Which comes down to this core emotional wound that keeps us pleasing other people by taking insurance. So it starts, I mean, I'm like a therapist type of person. I'm starting my therapeutic internship next semester, but I hate to say it because it's so cliche, but I think it starts in childhood.
It starts in childhood. No.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's legit.
So then it builds up throughout our lives. And then we end up with, I'm burnt out. I have no, I don't have enough money to have fun, to go on vacations as much as I want. I have to see all these clients, and my relationship sucks and my sex life sucks because I'm taking on too much at work. And, all of this stuff boils over at some point. And then I want to build a bigger vision. That's where you end up coming to.
You said a couple things that I just want to kind of go back to.
Yeah.
Because you were saying that, on some level, we don't feel like, or, specifically therapists may not feel like they can charge. And I found that's multifaceted, right? Because on one hand, you may think that I'm not good enough. You might not say this, but I found like I don't deserve to make that amount of money. I can't charge that much because that I'm not that person. So then there is this kind of assumption or unconscious belief and bias about what that kind of person is, or who that kind of person is that can make that amount of money. That's one. The thing that I find a lot of times is that my clients think that none of their clients could afford to pay. So they're not even thinking about another clientele that could afford them, right? They're keeping themselves stuck basically on a level of earning and identifying so much with clients that cannot pay them that they can't even conceptualize that there are clients that can pay them. And then you mentioned it, this belief or this idea that being wealthy or having money, let's not even talk about being wealthy, but just, earning more than maybe what they're earning now is somehow bad or wrong or intrinsically greedy. And because our values and our ethics are so in our minds, very, pure and humanitarian and ethical and altruistic, then anything that seems anti that, it just creates this cognitive dissonance, and we're not able to even, again, think about the possibility for ourselves. So that's been what I've found. I'd love to hear, hear if that's what you've been experiencing as well.
Yeah. So I get down into like the very specific details,
Let's
right?
go.
So I use the internal family systems model. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with the family systems model, not necessarily internal family systems model.
Okay, great. So the internal family systems model is the family systems model for a person, like one person. So basically, the elevator pitch sort of super short summary is we all have parts of ourselves. Like part of me wants to make money and part of me feels guilty. Like, so you can have both of those at the same time, right? So in the internal family systems model, we basically do family therapy with the different parts of ourselves. So we help the different parts of ourselves to sort of vent and to like get all of their sort of frustrations and angers out so that we can help them to form a new relationship so that you can get sort of consolidated in your life moving forward. So there's things that come out on the surface, and then there's sort of things that as we dig through this internal family systems model, we can really get to the point of the root of the wound, or the pain. And so what I found repeatedly over and over again is there can be sort of surface level parts of us, and some of that can sometimes be not feeling like we deserve enough or like we deserve it. But I think what I've seen it always comes down to is actually underneath that sense of I don't deserve it is I'm afraid of what will happen if I do it. Because if I do it, then there's a part of us that feels very vulnerable and very scared of rejection. And that shows up in everybody's life in a different way while they're growing up, being rejected, so different parts of us get rejected by our families, by people like kids at school when we're growing up, and by society. And that's why money and attachment, like money and relationships are so close together, because when we attach in relationship, that's how we create safety to navigate life as like a young child. And as we grow up, like making money is our safety, but also people need money. It's a resource. So they will reject the heck out of you if you have it, and they don't. They'll find any reason to blame you, and to like tear you down and to guilt you, especially in our profession, if you have that money. And so, but then that comes right back down to that part of you that is being rejected by another human being. And that's the same thing as an attachment wound. So that's why like money and relationships are like both so triggering. And so I find that that's like the emotional core. And if I could give anybody like a nugget to take away from this, is that you get curious about whether it's showing up in your life about I'm not good enough for it, or I'm afraid of what will happen, or I'll be rejected, or maybe the board is going to hate me and I'm going to lose my license if I raise my rate, which doesn't happen. You can raise your rate. Or whatever is shown, or let's say you have guilt or self-criticism, like you feel like you're going to be a bad person. The nugget is get curious about what you're afraid will happen to you if you were to do this, because we can create stories on the surface about morality and about ethics and all these things, but what it actually boils down to is you're just afraid of rejection, which is no joke. I don't say that to belittle that, but I say it to make it simple, because I think that's at the core of all of this work.
Yeah, I might agree with you on that. I want to just kind of take it back a little. You said so much that we could go into, but I want to take it back a little and go back to you and your story and your journey. And I know you said that you started at 16 with a lot of the, success seminars and things. And my goodness, I wish I had the impetus to kind of look into this at 16. I feel like,
well, thanks to my mom, she dragged me to that.
Oh my
That's why
goodness.
I got interested in it.
Oh man, your mom's amazing. That's awesome. So, but it sounds like, even still, so maybe this money part of the journey is a more recent deep dive for you. Is that correct? Yeah. So can you talk to us a little more in depth about what that journey has been like for you?
Yeah. So there was the initial part where I was just like learning skills and all this stuff, but it was like every time I tried to do it, I just like sabotaged myself or I would quit because I became emotionally overwhelmed. So it was like, go for the business, or the first thing I did was like sell Slim Jims, like that I bought from my retail job on clearance. And then I like sold them to people at my softball games when I was in high school. But then even then that initial feeling of guilt came in and fear. But then over the last few years, I've started a coaching business. And that was before I got into school. And at that point, it was a little better just because I'd spent more time with it. But I still had this like fear that was holding me back from like really just going for it and giving it my all. So what I ended up doing is I found an IFS therapist, and I can boil all of the entire journey of that, the emotional part, down to like one hour session, where in IFS we can sometimes, it's so introspective because you're talking with you're communicating with yourself. The therapist just facilitates it, sort of like hypnotherapy. So like deep in this like psychedelic, like really psychedelic like sort of state, I just started hearing the stories of these parts of me. Let's boil it down to these two: is the part of me that felt the guilt and shame, and then the fear, and then there was some guilt and shame around it, and then the part of me that wanted to go for it. And I was deep sort of in this psychedelic state, and I was letting each of these parts of me vent, and I was having to go like back and forth because it's like fear and guilt, and then like frustration and like wanting to move forward and really do this thing. And so it's just like both of those. And I find this with my clients too. A lot of the times it comes down to one or the other. And these parts get polarized and they hate each other. And that's what creates the conflict, because they have opposite agendas. But what really struck me is that I found that the part of me that wanted me to not be an entrepreneur was a part of me that felt rejected in my family. not even related to money.
Wait, so what do you mean? Tell us more.
Yeah, so just like rejected in my family just for sort of general reasons, like I was different than them and I felt rejected by them. And so this part of me carried this trauma, this like burden and this like heavy emotional charge around being rejected because it was so core to like this part of my upbringing. So that whenever I went to go be an entrepreneur, that part of me went, oh shit, like I'm going to get rejected again. And since I had never relieved that burden and released that emotional charge, then that was just getting triggered over and over and over. And so it was like this fear of just re-triggering that trauma from when I was a kid. And so that's why I take such an emotional sort of stance on this, is like, for me, it was just super emotional.
So I'm just taking that in because I think there's so much there that I imagine my viewers can also relate to, and hopefully they're maybe getting some ideas to look into therapy for themselves, which actually let's talk about now what you do. So thank you for sharing that. I think I actually have a friend who, I've been on this entrepreneurial journey with, and she was with me from the beginning. In fact, she kind of helped me start my entrepreneurial journey, and she is a therapist. And there's a lot of work that we would do kind of unofficially, but she, because she is a therapist, she would ask me these questions, and we do a lot of discussion. So I was able to get breakthroughs along the way, similar to what you've described. Whenever I had maybe a proposal and would say, hey, like, how much should I charge? I don't know if this is enough. And she would like challenge me and say,
Right.
What are you afraid is going to happen if you charge this? And so, I was able to do some of that work, but I love your example because I love having that container to be able to really focus on what's coming up. Mm-hmm. And have that safe space of someone who's aware and can help and support you in that journey. So is that what you offer for your clients as well now?
Yeah. Like I'm like the emotional support guy, like so far I'm not, and I'm working on creating a program, but so far I'm not the like strategy guy. Like I want to like help you hatch out of your egg so you can go do the things that you want. And then also if you're at a point in your career where say you're like you running a 6-figure practice and you want to move to coaching, but you're afraid of what's going to happen if you go online. Mm-hmm. I do IFS sessions with people. Mm-hmm. So that's, and then I provide daily tech support. I create customized meditation. So moving forward, if you ever come to that point again, I mean, at some point when you get to know your system and the way that you work, it sort of comes back to the same sort of common themes over again. So over and over. So I give people meditation so they can carry that forward into their career. But I think it's really important for some people, and not everyone is like this, like not everyone has this sort of trauma around this. A lot of people are like, what do you mean? Like you feel bad making money, so this isn't for everybody.
It's true. Yeah.
But for people who it is for, I think it's really important to have like a super affirming space, like where the parts of you that want to make money, like if you're a therapist, like you're sort of in a sea of people who are rooting against you. If like you're trying to raise your rates and get off insurance panels, like the majority of people that you talk to are gonna be pretty, against that, if they're on insurance panels, if they don't get it. So to have an affirming space to help that, like every part of you is accepted in this way and that money isn't a moral issue, then I think that's even just that is huge for people.
Yeah, I can imagine. All right. So this is kind of turned into a bit of a sales pitch for you, which I'm happy to support because I feel like it's so necessary and needed for those that it is necessary and needed for. So can you talk to us a little bit about what some of the results have been from some people that you've worked with? Of course, maintaining confidentiality. We understand. Everybody is on the same page here. Don't worry. Great.
So, I wish I could say I have results right now, but I just launched the program like a month ago.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So I have my results in that using IFS completely changed everything that I feel about money, and unlocked, me being able to just go for the money and go for helping people at the same time. But I do have clients that I'm working with now in my coaching program. So I'm finding, I'm sort of halfway with a bunch of them, and I'm finding that it's really, really helpful for them, and that it's a huge relief to have emotional support around this issue, because a lot of them just feel really alone, and they don't feel like anybody really gets it. And like, there's no one that specializes in this.
Let's shift a little bit. I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
Because that's most of the people that are watching this, they're coming to Rich Social Worker learning about this entrepreneurial journey, right? So, one of the things that I thought when I was first starting out was I wanted to go from where I was, which was not knowing a whole lot, to where these 6 and multi 7-figure earners were. And I thought I needed a website. I thought having a website would be the thing. So I did a website. Of course, no one came. Then I heard people talking about, like, you need to know your audience. And I'm like, I'm a social worker. Of course, every social worker wants what I want. Not so, right? So learning about the audience and along the way, well, I can talk now in terms of retrospect, recognizing that it's a journey and there are steps and stages. And so I love that you're like owning, like, hey, I'm on this journey. I'm in school. I just launched this program, but I'm here and I'm doing it. And I love that. And I think a lot of times when I talk to new entrepreneurs, they're apologetic in this stage. And I was as well. So I get it. Like, oh, I'm not where I want to be. I should have been further. And I'm like, no, celebrate this. This is the journey. This is the work. So you actually seem super comfortable and super just very self-aware on this journey. And maybe it's because of mom, dragging you from the age of 16, but maybe it's something else. So are you able to kind of speak to where you find that, I guess, ease or comfort or confidence on your journey? Or is it a facade?
It's definitely sometimes a facade, usually not. Every once in a while, I have to like sort of have a little bit of overreaching confidence,
And let me just say that doesn't change. That's at any stage.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't change.
There's always the next level.
There's always the next level.
You make it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So one reason is because of all the healing that I've done emotionally around this. And I think a lot of it also just comes from putting myself out there for the last few years. Like, people on the internet and just conversations on the internet can kind of go sideways, and you'll be rejected, and people won't like what you have to say because of your posts or your whatever. And they'll have whatever baggage they have. And you just sort of get used to that, bouncing off of you over and over. But also, like, recently I changed my diet and was able to resolve my depression and anxiety. So generally, emotionally, I just feel pretty great all the time. So that's a whole other conversation, but that's a real big part of how I feel. My mental health has just been great. But healing and just spending time on the internet has helped me to just take it less seriously.
Really?
And to just know that, like, people, you're not there for everybody. Like, if you want to offend some, like, if you want to be a defined person and have a defined message, then you're going to need to say things that are going to piss some people off because they're not your people, so I just take comfort in that, knowing if I'm pissing somebody off, not with malintention, but because they don't like what my message, then you're not my person. I wish you like success. I think that's a big lesson for a lot of new entrepreneurs, though, because there is, especially when you're starting out, you don't know who your people are, or you may misconstrue who your people are, right? And so you might have two people that seemingly look the same on the surface, and so one of them loves you and the other one doesn't love you, and you take that to heart. But I mean that's when you become a more aware entrepreneur. That's it, right? It's just like, well, you're not my person, you're not my people.
this is not for you. And the other thing that I would say is, I know you said the diet thing is an entirely different conversation, but I have found that the entrepreneurial journey has forced me, not that I didn't want to care about my body to begin with, but it really demands that you pay attention to your mental health and to how much you're sleeping and to what you're eating and how your system is reacting, because, well, I won't say because. You tell me, why do you think that is from your experience?
You just got to do so much as an entrepreneur, and you always got to be ready. You always got to be, and you got to be in a state that's going to make that you're happy enough that you're not like dragged down by the failures and the shit that happens when you're an entrepreneur, like the people getting angry at you on the internet, or like your Wi-Fi goes out. Like that's what I'm dealing with. Like the Wi-Fi goes out and then they're like mowing the lawn out at my condo while I'm trying to like be deep in like a psychedelic state, like in a session with somebody, like that shit just like drags you down. Yeah. And so I think, yeah, you're right. I actually never thought about that, but like people like, sort of Tim Ferriss, do you know Tim Ferriss? Or at the 4-hour work, and just like all these guys and these girls, and they're all just like biohackers, they're all like, I'm always trying to find the thing that gives me the next edge, because when you're, and especially if you're employing people, like you're at the top of like a dominance hierarchy. And when you're at the top of the dominance hierarchy, for better or for worse, like you also have more responsibility than anybody else. And because you're providing for people's families and for people's well-being. So you got to show up like an alpha. Like you have to be strong, and but that doesn't necessarily come from just faking it. You can do that in an emotionally sensitive way, but you have to be able to show up. And yeah, so you're so right. I never thought about that before.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've definitely experienced it. Yeah. All right. So I know when we were planning to have this conversation, we were kind of talking a little bit about what we wanted to share, or what you would share. Yeah. And so is there something in particular that you want to make sure that listeners or viewers come away with when we talk about healing money wounds and money trauma?
I think there's one more thing, but then the main nugget is really just to drive home, like, what are you afraid of? And then in IFS, the ideal is that we get compassion for that fear. It's not that we like get like I said, alpha male, but I don't want to be like, it's not like, like football coach, like push past your fear. Like it's like getting soft and actually listening to yourself and listening to those fears. And because those fears aren't real ultimately. But they do have a power over you until you're able to really be present with them. Just like if a child were screaming, for your attention, they're not going to stop until you like sit down and talk with them. And then maybe once you talk with this part of yourself that's afraid, then they realize that you're actually safe and you're okay, even if you do get rejected, because people reject you all the time as an entrepreneur, and it's all right. But there's one last thing I would just say is that your money mindset as a therapist or as an entrepreneur is contagious. So this is something I think in social work school and in sort of political discourse, I think gets a little bit lost when we start talking about social service. Is like one facet of it is helping people and creating social programming that sort of pulls people up when they don't have the ability to make the money that they want, or to have the money that they want. But another facet of it is empowering people to make money and to help them sort of get unstuck when they're sort of in poverty, or they're, in a place where they don't want to be. So if you as a therapist are stuck in this fear, shame, and guilt that's keeping you small, you're going to be able to meet the needs of your clients, at your own expense probably, but you're going to be able to do that. But you're actually not probably ever going to help them make more money. Mm-hmm. Because if you're uncomfortable with that, then you're just going to perpetuate what you feel is right and sort of what you got going on. So I think from that perspective, it's actually, you can take this and be very altruistic with this. But it's so backwards from a lot of the conversations that we have as therapists and we have in our ethics. because we really want to help people, but we lose the chance to empower people because we're not willing to take a look at these wounds that we have around money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I say make more money, help more people.
Yeah.
But you touched on something actually, which is, why would someone who maybe hasn't thought about this before, why would it be incumbent on them to really think about this for themselves?
Like you need to have a choice. Like if you're stuck taking care of other people's needs and staying broke and unhappy, like you're doing that out of a compulsion. You're not doing that out of freedom. Like what I want to give you is the ability to have choice, because right now, like you don't, and I want you to be able to have that if you're listening and you're in that situation, like you're driven by so much fear and guilt and shame and self-doubt that you can't figure it out. Like I want you to be able to help people or help yourself or both, but to be able to move fluidly between that, because you're not actually choosing to help people if you're just doing it out of compulsion.
That's so good. That's so good, Grayson. I mean, I feel like we could keep this conversation going. Like I want to talk about conscious capitalism, and I want to talk about like some other things. But I'm also aware of my audience's attention span.
For sure. Yeah. Maybe we can do another one and get a little more abstract.
Yeah. Tell people where they can find you, where they can follow you, and how they can connect.
I am on my website, therapistmoneymindset.com. I have a free 8-step guide to healing your money mindset for therapists on there. If you want to download that, you can start doing this work. You can also just shoot me an email, Grayson@therapistmoneymindset.com. Let me know how this impacted you. Tell me if you have any questions. But yeah, that's where I connect with people.
Grayson, thank you so much. I have a feeling we're going to be crossing paths a lot going forward. Guys, if you're here and you've made it this far, thanks for being here. I believe you can dream, be, do, or have anything you want, but it starts with your mindset. So make sure it's a rich one. Bye.